They are at the party, surrounded by people, conversation happening all around them, laughter, connection, energy, and they feel completely alone. You think intelligent people should have easier time connecting, that being smart means understanding people better, that cognitive ability translates to social success. You assume that someone who can solve complex problems can certainly handle basic human interaction, that intelligence is advantage in all domains, including social ones. But extremely intelligent people often feel most alone when surrounded by others. Not because they lack social skills or cannot perform social interaction competently, because the cognitive gap between them and most people is so large that genuine connection becomes nearly impossible. Because their internal experience is so different from others' internal experience that sharing it feels like speaking language no one else understands. They can participate in the conversation. They can laugh at the jokes. They can perform all the social behaviors that make them appear engaged and connected. But internally, they are profoundly isolated because nothing being discussed engages them intellectually. No one is operating at cognitive level where they actually live. The entire interaction is happening at surface they left behind years ago. The loneliness is not about lacking people. It is about being surrounded by people while having no one who can meet you where you actually are. It is about performing connection while experiencing disconnection. It is about being visible while feeling invisible. It is about speaking the same language while meaning completely different things. Understanding why intelligent people feel alone even in crowds requires examining not what they lack, but what the cognitive gap creates. Isolation that exists not despite social presence, but because of fundamental difference in how they process and experience reality. Everyone is talking, sharing opinions, having discussions. They sit there thinking this is painfully obvious, or completely wrong, or missing the complexity. You call this conversation. They call it intellectual isolation no one else notices. Here is the first reason. Most conversation is boring to extremely intelligent people. Not boring in sense of unpleasant, but boring in sense of operating at cognitive level that does not engage them. The topics are surface level. The analysis is shallow. The conclusions are obvious. The connections being made are connections they made years ago and have already moved far beyond. Someone is excitedly explaining concept they just discovered. The intelligent person understood that concept at age 12 and has spent the last 20 years exploring its implications, limitations, and connections to 17 other domains. Someone is debating position with passionate conviction. The intelligent person can see both sides so clearly, can see the nuance being missed, can see the false dichotomy being constructed, can predict exactly where the argument will go because they have watched this same debate play out countless times. They cannot share their actual thoughts because their actual thoughts require context and background and leaps that others cannot follow. They cannot explain what they are really thinking because the explanation would take 45 minutes and require introducing concepts that would themselves require explanation. They cannot engage at the level where they actually operate because that level is inaccessible to most people in the room, so they simplify. They participate at the level where others are operating. They contribute points that move the conversation forward incrementally rather than sharing the complex understanding they actually have. They perform engagement while being profoundly bored because the alternative is either dominating the conversation with explanations no one wants to hear or being silent and seeming disengaged. This is exhausting. It is also isolating because they cannot share their actual internal experience, cannot express what they are really thinking, cannot operate at the cognitive level that is natural for them without alienating everyone else. They are constantly translating their thoughts into simpler versions, constantly dumbing down their actual understanding to make it accessible, constantly pretending that the obvious observation someone just made is insightful rather than something they considered and moved beyond years ago. They are alone because no one in the room is operating where they operate, and they cannot come down to where others operate for extended periods without feeling like they are dying of intellectual starvation. They understand the joke, they see the humor, they even laugh, but inside they are also deconstructing it, seeing the assumptions behind it, the worldview it reveals. You call this overthinking. They call it being unable to experience anything without analysis. The second reason intelligent people feel alone is that they cannot turn off the analysis. While everyone else is experiencing the party, the conversation, the joke, the moment, intelligent people are simultaneously experiencing it and analyzing it. Every interaction passes through cognitive filter that examines it, categorizes it, connects it to patterns, evaluates its implications. Someone tells a joke. Everyone laughs. The intelligent person also laughs, but they are simultaneously thinking about what the joke reveals about the teller's values, what assumptions it relies on, what power dynamics it reinforces or subverts, how it connects to sociological patterns they have studied. They cannot just experience the joke, they experience the joke while also experiencing their analysis of the joke. This creates a layer of separation. They are not fully present in the moment because they are also observing the moment, analyzing the moment, understanding the moment in ways that remove them from direct experience of the moment. They are simultaneously participant and observer, and the observer part prevents them from ever being fully immersed in the participation. Everyone else is in the experience. They are watching themselves have the experience, while also analyzing the experience and comparing it to other experiences and understanding its context and implications. They are cognitively one step removed from direct engagement with reality, always processing, always thinking, always understanding in ways that prevent simple being. This is why they feel alone even when surrounded by people having good time, because everyone else is present in a way they cannot access. Everyone else can just be at the party, just enjoy the conversation, just laugh at the joke without simultaneously deconstructing it. The intelligent person is trapped in their own analysis, unable to shut off the cognitive processes that make direct experience impossible. They long for the ability to just be present without thinking about being present, to just enjoy something without analyzing why they enjoy it, to just connect without understanding all the psychological dynamics operating in the connection. But they cannot. Their intelligence will not let them. The analysis is automatic, unconscious, unavoidable. It separates them from direct experience while everyone else is immersed in direct experience. And this creates fundamental isolation that exists even when they are performing successful social interaction. Everyone is being themselves, genuine, authentic, expressing their real thoughts and feelings. They watch and see the performance, the social calculation, the strategic presentation. You call this cynicism. They call it seeing clearly what everyone else is embedded in. The third reason is that intelligent people see through social performances that others either do not see or choose not to see. They recognize when someone is adjusting their opinion based on who is in the room. They notice when someone's laughter is genuine versus performed. They observe when someone is sharing vulnerability strategically to generate specific response rather than genuinely expressing emotion. This is not because they are more perceptive emotionally. Often, they are less emotionally attuned than average. But they are better at recognizing patterns, at seeing inconsistencies, at noticing when behavior does not align with stated values, or when presentation shifts based on audience. They see the mechanics of social interaction while others are experiencing it as organic connection. Everyone else experiences the party as a group of people genuinely connecting. The intelligent person sees ecosystem of social calculations, status negotiations, impression management, and strategic presentation. They recognize that most conversation is not about exchanging ideas, but about establishing or maintaining position within social hierarchy. They see that most self-disclosure is carefully calibrated to generate desired impression rather than genuine vulnerability. This seeing creates profound loneliness because it makes genuine connection nearly impossible. If you recognize that most social interaction is performance, if you see the calculation behind the warmth, if you understand that people are strategically managing how they are perceived, you cannot participate in the illusion of genuine spontaneous connection that makes social interaction satisfying for others. They want to believe in the authenticity, they want to experience social interaction as genuine, but they cannot unsee what they see. They cannot stop recognizing the patterns. They cannot participate in the performance while believing it is genuine interaction. So they are alone in their seeing. Everyone else believes the connections are real, believes the vulnerability is genuine, believes the social warmth is spontaneous. The intelligent person recognizes it is mostly performance, mostly calculation, mostly strategic presentation, and this recognition separates them from others who are able to believe in and experience the connection as real. They are not superior because of this seeing. They are isolated because of it. The seeing prevents the experiencing. The understanding prevents the connection. Someone shares a problem. Everyone offers advice, support, solutions. They sit there knowing exactly why the person has the problem, what they are not seeing, what they will not change. You call this helpful engagement. They call it watching predictable patterns no one else recognizes. The fourth reason is that intelligent people often understand others better than others understand themselves, and this understanding creates unbridgeable distance. They see the patterns others repeat, the defense mechanisms others do not recognize they are using. the ways others sabotage themselves while blaming circumstances, the predictable outcomes of choices others believe will work out differently this time. Friend is complaining about relationship. Everyone is sympathetic, offering support, validating the friend's perspective. The intelligent person sees exactly what the friend is doing to create the dynamic they are complaining about, sees the pattern this friend repeats in every relationship, can predict with high accuracy how this relationship will end because they have watched this friend enact the same drama 5 times before. But they cannot say this, cannot explain what they see because it would be received as judgmental, as cold, as lacking empathy. Cannot share their actual understanding because their understanding is more accurate than the friend's self-understanding, and people do not want accuracy, they want validation, so they offer the expected support. They make sympathetic sounds. They participate in the social ritual of validating their friend's narrative while knowing that the narrative is incomplete at best and self-serving distortion at worst. They are alone in their understanding while everyone else is bonding through shared belief in the friend's version of events. This happens constantly. They see what others do not see about themselves, about their situations, about their choices. They understand with clarity that would be helpful if it could be shared, but that cannot be shared because most people cannot tolerate accurate feedback about themselves. Most people need their self-deceptions protected, their narratives validated, their limited self-understanding confirmed rather than challenged. The intelligent person sits in social situations, seeing clearly while everyone else sees through their preferred filters and distortions. They watch predictable disasters unfold while everyone else is surprised. They recognize patterns that seem obvious once pointed out, but that no one notices until the pattern has completed itself again. They are alone in their understanding, surrounded by people who cannot see what they see, who do not want to see what they see, who would be upset if they explained what they see. So they stay silent, and they remain isolated in their clarity. They want to share what they are thinking, what they are interested in, what fascinates them. But it requires too much context, too much explanation, too much background. You call this poor communication. They call it having internal world that is inaccessible to most people. The 5th reason is that intelligent people's internal world is so complex and so specialized that sharing it is nearly impossible in casual social settings. The things they think about require extensive background knowledge to understand. The connections they make span multiple domains that others have not studied. The problems they find fascinating are problems others do not even recognize as problems. They want to talk about what they actually think about. But what they actually think about would require 45-minute explanation just to establish the baseline necessary for others to understand what they are discussing. By the time they provide the context, everyone is bored or confused or both. So they learn to not share what they actually care about. Instead, they participate in conversations about topics they find less interesting, but that are accessible to everyone. They talk about the weather, about popular culture, about shared experiences that require no specialized knowledge. They perform interest in topics that do not actually interest them, because those are the topics where connection is possible with most people. This creates deep loneliness, because the core of who they are, what they think about, what fascinates them, what they spend their mental energy on, is invisible to everyone around them. They are constantly presenting simplified, accessible version of themselves, while their actual internal experience remains hidden because it is too complex to share, too specialized to explain, too far removed from others' frames of reference. They feel like they are speaking different language. When they say something simple, they mean something complex that is connected to vast network of understanding they cannot share. When others say something simple, they mean something simple. The same words mean different things. The same conversations are happening at different cognitive levels. They long for someone who can engage with their actual internal world. Someone who does not need 45 minutes of context. Someone who can make the connections they make. Someone who finds interesting what they find interesting. Someone they do not have to translate themselves for constantly. But that person is statistically rare. So they remain in crowds of people with whom they can have surface interaction but cannot share what is actually happening in their mind. Visible but unseen, speaking but unheard, present but alone, they engage successfully. People like them. They seem socially competent. They can navigate interactions smoothly. But it is all performance, all energy expenditure, all work. You call this socializing. They call it exhausting management of gap no one else notices. The sixth reason intelligent people feel alone in crowds is that successful social interaction requires them to constantly manage the cognitive gap, and this management is exhausting in ways others do not experience. They must constantly translate their thoughts into simpler versions, constantly slow down their processing to match others' pace, constantly explain obvious things as if they are insights, constantly pretend that conversation is engaging when they are bored. Every social interaction is performance. They are acting the role of person who is at the same cognitive level as everyone else, person who finds these topics fascinating, person who is learning things from conversation that they already knew. They are managing every interaction to make others comfortable, to not seem arrogant or condescending, to participate successfully without revealing how different their internal experience is. This is work that never ends. There is no moment of relaxation where they can just be themselves without management. Every statement must be evaluated before speaking. Is this too complex? Will this make me seem arrogant? Do I need to explain the 7 background concepts before this will make sense? Should I just not say it? They are constantly calibrating, constantly adjusting, constantly performing accessibility. Meanwhile, everyone else is just being themselves, just having conversation, just saying what they think without extensive pre-processing of how it will be received or whether it is accessible or whether it will create distance. Others can be spontaneous in ways intelligent people cannot be spontaneous, because spontaneity for intelligent person means saying things that create awkwardness or confusion or distance. So they manage, they perform, they work constantly to seem normal, to be accessible, to connect successfully, and it is exhausting. By the end of social event, they are drained not from the interaction itself, but from the constant management of the gap between their natural cognitive level and the level where successful social interaction happens. Everyone else leaves feeling energized by connection. The intelligent person leaves feeling exhausted by performance. They were never actually connecting. They were managing the appearance of connection while remaining fundamentally separate. They were working the entire time, and no one noticed the work, because the whole point of the work is to make the gap invisible. They know they are different, know they think differently, know they process differently. They cannot talk about it, cannot acknowledge it, cannot explain it without sounding arrogant. You call this humility. They call it being unable to name the source of their isolation. The seventh and perhaps most painful reason is that intelligent people cannot acknowledge the gap that creates their loneliness without appearing arrogant or elitist. They cannot say, I feel alone because I am substantially more intelligent than most people and this creates unbridgeable cognitive distance, without immediately being judged as arrogant, as having superiority complex, as being asshole who thinks they are better than everyone. So they suffer the isolation in silence. They cannot name what they experience because naming it requires acknowledging that they are cognitively different in ways that matter, and acknowledging this is socially unacceptable. They cannot explain why social interaction exhausts them, why they feel alone in crowds, why genuine connection is so rare, because the explanation is most people cannot operate at the cognitive level where I naturally function, and you cannot say this without being condemned. This creates double isolation. They are isolated by the cognitive gap itself, and they are isolated by inability to acknowledge or discuss the gap that isolates them. They must pretend the gap does not exist while experiencing its effects constantly. They must act as if everyone is the same, while knowing that everyone is not the same in ways that fundamentally affect their ability to connect. They watch others form connections that seem effortless. They wonder what is wrong with them that they cannot form those connections. They blame themselves for being cold or distant or unable to be present. But the actual problem is not fixable character flaw, it is cognitive difference that creates experiences of social interaction that are fundamentally different from others' experiences. They cannot get support for this isolation because getting support requires explaining the isolation, and explaining the isolation requires acknowledging intelligence gap, and acknowledging intelligence gap is socially prohibited. So they remain silent about the source of their loneliness while experiencing the loneliness constantly. They are trapped. Cannot connect because of the gap, cannot discuss the gap because discussing it is socially unacceptable, cannot get help navigating the isolation because explaining the isolation makes them seem arrogant. So they remain alone, in crowds, in relationships, in conversations, alone with their understanding that they cannot share and their experiences that they cannot explain. Intelligent people feel alone in crowds not because they lack social skills, not because they are antisocial, not because they choose isolation, because the cognitive gap between them and most people creates fundamental barrier to genuine connection. They are alone because most conversation bores them at cognitive level where they cannot engage, because they cannot turn off the analysis that separates them from direct experience, because they see through social performances others believe in, because they understand people better than people understand themselves in ways that cannot be shared, because their internal world is too complex to explain in casual conversation, because managing the gap is exhausting performance others do not recognize as performance, because they cannot acknowledge the gap without appearing arrogant. The loneliness exists despite successful social performance, despite being liked, despite appearing engaged, despite having friends and relationships, because the core experience of their cognitive life is inaccessible to most people, and this makes genuine connection nearly impossible. They are not superior because of their intelligence. They are isolated because of it. The intelligence that allows them to see more, understand more, process more, also prevents them from connecting with people who see less, understand less, process less. The same capacity that makes them effective at complex cognition makes them ineffective at simple presence. They long for someone who can meet them where they are, someone who does not require constant translation, someone they can be themselves with without management or performance, someone who experiences social interaction the same way they do, as simultaneously engaging and exhausting, as rich with patterns most people miss, as requiring constant navigation of gap between what they see and what others see. But that person is statistically rare, so they remain in crowds feeling alone, performing connection while experiencing isolation, speaking without being heard, present without being met, visible without being seen. The crowd is not the problem. The intelligence is not the problem. The gap is the problem. And the gap cannot be closed by trying harder or being more social or performing better. The gap just is. And it creates loneliness that exists precisely because they are surrounded by people who cannot understand why they feel alone.